I'll bet you're wondering why this thing has no axles under it. They went to Henderson driveline to be gone through and double check, make sure they're right, rebuild anything that needs rebuilding, and add disc brakes to the rear. Moved the radiator back, added the AC condenser and the horn. Got the main power circuit breaker, all the relays. ECU is mounted, sealed up the inner fender well, so all I have to do is mount this down. We've got main power wires that come and go in all directions. Door seals on. We've got the pedal power OBD2 run into the cab. These are signal wires for various things that have to get connected. Glove box, which has to go inside of here, which I'm not doing until all this is running. There's no point in burying it. If you have a problem, you have to take it all back out again. So I like to do a systems check before I seal it up permanent. On this truck, I'm going to use this Ford Motor Company power steering. These are found on a lot of Ford cars and even some Volvos. This one I got off of a Volvo. Because they're half the cost. If you look up these kind of power steering pumps with a reservoir or without a reservoir, they're $300–400, you know. But if you look for one from, say, an 05 Volvo, you can get this for $100 with the bracket and the plugs and everything. And they're super easy. You got main power and ground, and then one of these is a call. And that's it. So when you turn your ignition on, power this, the pump will kick on, it builds pressure. As soon as your key is on, you have power steering. They're not hugely strong, but it should be just fine for the gearbox that's on this. It's a power steering gearbox that was on this truck when it came here. We saved it. So I'll just adapt pressure and return and mount a remote reservoir that'll fill in the top of here. Trouble is, I can't get this whole bracket down in the hole. I had to move the radiator out, and initially when I roughed this truck in, this fit in there, but it doesn't now. So I'm going to try and take these 3 bolts off, and this piece of it, I'll use parts of this bracket, weld to it, and mount it to something in there. Hopefully I can get just this small portion down in the spot that I initially wanted this. So let me see if I can get that to happen, because I got a ton of stuff to assemble in that bay. Now, this will hang on the frame, that I can use it. I'll make another bracket and another bracket, at least one of them, rubber mounted. It'll be secure. Let's try it out. So we've got the bracket in there. The hoses should be able to go toward the power steering pump. The reservoir should go somewhere. And this should drop down onto the bracket. So this wire is power feed into the body harness, which controls brake lights, turn signals. That comes over here. It's going to run through a grommet down there behind the battery, and it's going to tie into this. That is a 150 amp circuit breaker. Main power comes out of the battery into this breaker, out of this breaker into the ECU and its controllers. It also comes out of the circuit breaker into this fuse, which feeds that power steering pump, which is a heavy amp draw. There you go. So this main power right here goes to the starter. This main power goes to the alternator, which actually returns power in. This main power supplies voltage to that circuit breaker. Out of that circuit breaker, it goes to this control box and all of these relays for the ECU. It also comes out of the circuit breaker and feeds the power steering pump through this fuse, which is just an additional layer of protection. And then of course the body harness will also get tied into that. And it has its own fuse box inside. With the engine cover on, it gives me an idea. And once you get all the hoses in here, this engine bay is going to be packed. But I like a clean look. So my thought is over here, the battery, I don't want to cover that up. There's an oil fill extension that goes from the valve cover down there, and it's so that you can fill your oil here, which is how it should be. Make it easier to change the oil. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I like all this stuff, but I don't like to look at it. So I'm gonna make a cover that goes from here straight over and straight down. And then you won't see any of the hoses, you won't see any of the wires. And I think that I need to do that. Yeah, I think I need to do that. I think overall it's going to look rowdy when you open the hood. Yeah. So the more I looked at the thing, the more I realized I wanted a cover over all of that electronic gizmo business. So that's what I did. I made a quick cover on the bender, and I'll trim it off to make it look really good and finish painting it and whatever. But for right now, I think this is a better look. So it looks complicated, but it's fairly simple. You measure the tank depth first. Look at that. It says 10, but because the way this pitches up like that, I'm going to take an inch off. I'd rather have a little too much in the fuel tank than bone dry. So we're going to go 9. We'll go over here. 9, 5 1/8, and 4 1/8. So length A is the overall length of this, which I always have to cut these. 4 1/8. So it's right there. I take this bottom piece off, mount this to the top, cut it, and that's that. And then the next one is this rod, whatever that said. Four and 5/8 it is, center to center. So you just go here, 4 5/8. There, you cut that off, put that on, drop this in the hole. You're good. Okay, I'm not sure if I can do this by myself, but as with 99.9% of all things around here, I do it myself, because good luck finding anybody to help you. So hopefully all the holes are drilled in the right spot, which I did not do. We got 2. That one's definitely wrong. Suppose I should have checked before I welded them in, huh? Yep, they're wrong. knee of the hole. Okay, let's see here. Hopefully these bolts line up. I know the guy that drilled them, he's pretty good. But is he great? That's the thing. No, he's not. Can you get this one and this one? You just gotta oblong the front two holes, and I think it will go. Nope. What about this one? That one's good. So it's just this one. Third time's a charm, right? Since the holes pretty much lined up, I had to oblong a couple of them, and I'm working by myself. This should be fun, right? Well, back out again. Fourth time is the charm, is it? Need more than a charm at this point. Okay, let's go. Bolts, bolts. Okay, so now, one at a time. Okay. Right, there you go. Okay, and there you go. So now we'll snug that up. I can reach the fittings, if only just. And let's see what happens. Well, it's not great. Spot where all my bolts are. 'Cause once I start going, there's no going back. Okay, halfway there. There you go. Now let's see if all those fittings clear, because I cut that whole top edge. See what happens. It took some doing because I was by myself. You can get to all the fittings. We'll be able to run our filler neck right down through here and up over that. So okay, we got it. It was no easy going, but it's in. Feel a little better now. So normally under one of these, right there is where your spare tire would go. But on this truck, just pretend it's a BMW, because BMW figures on a lot of their models, they don't need a spare tire, because if you get a flat and you own a BMW, you can afford to have it towed. If you have brand new tires and you don't run over any serious road hazards, you're going to be fine. You're not going to have any flats anyways. Don't worry about it. I have the base ignition connected. I have temporary power to the fuel pump. It has to be routed. I have not tested the fuel lines or the regulator. I got about 2 gallons of gas in it. I'm going to power this battery, cycle the key, wake up the ECU, and fill the lines with fuel. If that happens and there's no leaks, I'll fire the truck. I'm like, what is the problem? I just did this yesterday. I know what the problem is. I got the main circuit breaker off because this whole truck is protected like 4 times. It's a little redundant, but safety, I have learned, is very important. Now when I turn the key, I should hear the pump. Bingo. Alright, I heard fluid. The lines are empty. It's got to return. I'm going to do that a couple of times. That made it to the front. Check for leaks. Don't see any pouring down or otherwise. It's probably got air in it. Make sure the ignition is hot. The engine's going to be unhappy right now because there's all kinds of things not connected and it needs a lot of information, but alright, I said I was going to do a standing backflip. I'll just find some old footage of me doing a double backflip on my bicycle instead of trying to take my fat ass and rotate it, because this ain't that kind of circus. Alright. So where are we now on this build? Anybody that does these things knows as you go through and cross off items on the list, you add a few more. And that's the process of elimination when you're going through this. So we have the filler neck connected to the tank. Obviously I poured fuel in it and the truck does run. I'm going to utilize what's called a dry brake, where when you open that up like a modern car, there's no gas cap to undo. You just stuff the hose in there and fill it. I'm using that because I think it's cleaner and it's super cool. I started to lay out all the cooling hoses. This is part of the factory air intake. I cut off those additional chambers that we don't need on this vehicle, so I'm going to cut this. We're going to add a 3-inch tube and get it down here so that it has a standard filter. I got the cover to go over that. That's been painted. These additional hoses that are here, these are all part of the cooling system, which I just started to lay out. So I've got the bottom sorted. There's an oil cooler down there that comes from the factory. You can see it down there. It's got a new filter on it, and there is oil in this engine, obviously, because I had it running. But a couple of those fittings that you put hose onto, what that's designed to do is to cool the oil with antifreeze from the radiator that gets plumbed into these hoses. And that one came from the original engine when it was brought here, and it's dented. I don't like it, so we're going to replace that, and we're going to get some of the factory hoses on the bottom half to properly cool the oil and the transmission. Speaking of which, this I would normally call a cooler, a trans cooler, because it goes to the bottom of the transmission and the pressure lines go in and out of it, and then it connects to the cooling system, which I'm going to plumb in. These are more complicated than your basic Coyote swap, where you just basically go radiator in, out, heat in, out. This one has in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out, all kinds of stuff. So I guess they've proven that the 10R80 likes warm fluid, which reduces wear and increases longevity. So that's cool. We still have to plumb this in, and I have to get a few of the factory hoses that this engine didn't come with in order to make all this work. Another thing that has to get completed yet is this power steering gearbox. I have the hoses that go into this, and then I'm going to bring them out, and those are standard American flare type. What they end up with down there is a metric type, and as this come off of a Volvo, and there's going to be our reservoir where you'll add the fluid. So I'm going to adapt the hoses from this to that. That's another thing that has to get done. I do have the reproduction washer bottle connected and plumbed into the chrome sprayers that are on the hood's pretty dirty from sitting around, but yeah, those are cool. Look at that, we've got lights. All the lights work all the way around this truck. Obviously no turn signals yet because I have to wire them in on the inside of the cab. And remember, the axles are out getting disc brake conversions and having the gears looked at so that we don't ever have an issue with this truck. While that stuff looked good, it's best to have it inspected by the pros. So in here, there's a lot to be done yet. The headliner arrived. It's over here. It's made of ABS. I believe it's acrylonitrile butadiene styrene is the proper name for this plastic. And I know that because there are plumbing pipes made with ABS, and it's crappy for plumbing, but it's good for this stuff. However, this is pretty thick, and I bet it's going to be a struggle to install, but I'm not too worried about it, as there are trim pieces that hold it all in. We'll get to that as we go on. The tilt column, horn button, all that's ready to go. I've got this ignition switch wired in so that it's controlling the engine. Here's all my turn signals. I got to get all that stuff handled and obviously pull this out, and it individually gets a plug from the controller for that digital dash and takes all the wires. All of the signals from various components go into this, and then out of this you plug into that display cable right there, and it goes to the back of the digital dash. So all of that has to be installed yet. I do have this electric door locks, power door locks, and all it is basically a switch with an electric servo that somehow I need it to operate the door locks. And being electric, the only other way to get into this truck is with a key, and I want to make sure that the key will override this, because if you have a power problem, you need to be able to get into your truck without breaking a window. I don't know how all this is going to work yet. To be honest, I opened it, looked at it, and went, yeah, I'll get to it. So I still have to do that. This, inside this box, is the wiper transmission. We still have to send this out for a rebuild. There's a company not far away that does that. We are adding dual shocks to the axles when they come back. I am going to pull the seats out, add the seat belts, which are shoulder harnesses. They're gonna go right here. There's gonna be a mount for this right here, and it's gonna go down, and then your 3-point harness will go across your lap. So essentially, we've got a bunch of odds and ends plumbing for coolant, power steering lines, the exhaust has to be done. Right now it's open headers. The factory F250 headers are on and just blowing out into the ground. I need to put on O2 sensor bungs so that it can read that. But the exhaust, that's coming. Yeah, there's a couple things I can show you on the interior, and that's about it for this update. So let's, these are your shifter buttons for shift up, shift down. You have a option to control this transmission manually. We still have carpet, obviously. The 4-wheel drive switch over on the dash, that's happening. I'm also going into the driveline place this week, and I'm gonna go over the axles with them and hopefully get a return date when they'll be done. But we have to put the axles back on. I have to give it some sort of an alignment. We call it a tape measure alignment. That's what we're gonna do here. Also the full brake system. I have the master cylinder in and the bias valve, but you can't run brake lines to brakes that aren't there. So we have to get the axles back. I'll plumb in all the lines for the brakes, but we have the drive shafts. They've been test fit. Once the axles come back, I can put the brakes on it. I will have run a temperature test on all the coolant lines. Once that happens, we can put the axles, set it on the ground, and I will make it move under its own power. And hopefully that is what you will see next time on the next episode of Big Red. It's nearing completion. It's getting really close, and I know it's been a long time coming, but these are complicated projects. You got to remember, this is 5 trucks in one. We've got the front clip from a different year. We've got the interior from 2 different years, the suspension from another year, parts of the bed were put together. If you go back and see some of the older videos on this truck from the last year or so, there's an enormous amount of work to save this truck. A lot of guys wouldn't have even touched a vehicle like this. I know several of my other builder buddies that were like, you're nuts. And honestly, it's a labor of love. I knew I could do it. I knew I could get it here. And this is cool, but it's not what is going to be the best part. That's driving it. Driving it is going to be awesome because of what it took to get here, where it came from, and how it's going to live the rest of its life. So please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Stay tuned. Watch the next episode for Big Red because this thing is going to live under its own power. And hallelujah, I can't wait to put some mud up underneath it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.